Welcome to our module on perception rehabilitation. Perception rehabilitation is a model that I created in order to help me to better understand and to deal with my own health from a holistic standpoint, especially as it pertains to stress and the elimination of any unwanted stress in my life. We recognize that because of the very high percentage of illness and issues that we deal with are all directly the result of stress. And so, if I can better understand what stresses me out and those things in my life, then I can do something to eliminate that. And then, of course, eliminate the physical side effects that come from it. So within perception rehabilitation, we use particular language, and that as it results to stress, we use the term survival mode. Basically the point of stress is to help us to survive, and the opposite of being stressed or trying to survive is being safe. And so we use those terms, survival mode and safety mode, throughout this model as our way of discussing anything that leads us to this physiology of stress, and then, of course, anything that takes away that physiology of stress. And that, of course, is the point. Elimination of undesired survival responses is the point of perception rehabilitation. So, of course, it requires an awareness of the self and all of its individual components, body, mind, spirit, okay? An awareness of the survival response and the stimulus that activates it is basically the first step to making any sort of lasting change. Once the awareness has taken place, then identification of the stimulus throughout the self is necessary. And of course, transformation can then take place in each of these areas by putting on new lenses of our own construct. So we have the opportunity basically to be who we choose to be. All right? So, in basic process of observing how we respond to situations, and then creating how we want to respond to that situation, and then practicing it over and over and over again until it becomes a belief. This is why the first step in the process is awareness of ourself. If we don't know what to look for, it's really difficult to identify the cause of our physical survival mode. And so obviously, if we can't identify the cause, then we can't create new lenses to practice with. So the better we understand ourselves throughout this process and through observation, the more sensitive we'll become to what is basically our survival stimuli. So first step, awareness of the self, okay? Awareness of the self is the most critical piece of any transformation process or any change. And the most important thing to be aware of is how we respond to this crazy world around us. All sorts of theories on behavioral change, cognitive changes, all of those things, they all start with awareness. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Basically, it just proves that it's a highly important piece of any transformation. Is obviously the first step is to be aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what needs to be changed. So everyone's aware of the struggles in life. We're aware of our feelings that we have during certain situations. But most people aren't aware of how or why these things are happening. So this type of awareness is often described as an understanding of who we are in our environment, and that this outside view is the beginning of making some sort of a change. So anything in the environment that is perceived as threatening switches on our survival mode. Most people operate in this mode far more often than they need to. Some of us entirely in the majority of the time, because we're not aware that what we perceive and what that's doing to our physical body. Okay, so the goal is to be safe in our daily lives and to be safe with ourselves. So if a person just use for an example, wants to start exercising, okay? But they really hate exercising. Okay, no show of hands. So their body will see this as a threat, and of course it's going to fight back. All right. So in the same way, those who want to be more social, they get themselves involved into a crowded party, and they can't handle the situation because their mind and their spirit are completely opposed to these crowded situations. And so then there goes the survival mode. It's like a total self-immune system, if you will, that just doesn't tolerate outside invaders. Okay, we find ourselves running into previously held ideas or commitments, and that sends our whole immune system into crazy flight mode, or fight, as the term goes. So the problem is that when we decide what an invader is and isn't, but if we're not aware that we're the ones deciding what an invader is and isn't, then we can't do anything to correct it. And that's what we're about here. So we need to start by looking at ourselves to see these situations of survival and safety. And we can break the body down, or the self down, into the body, the mind, and the spirit. It keeps it simple. It keeps it fairly well grounded and founded through science and faith and all of those different things. But those are the basic components, and everything is that way easier to define and identify. So each of our components obviously then have unique characteristics that we can focus on individually and then compile them collectively. Becoming aware of the body is the most important in this model because it's what's visible. So we're going to let it be our guide. Becoming aware of the perceptions in our mind and how we view the world is vital because this is what we're going to use as an avenue for transformation. And then, of course, becoming aware of our beliefs is how we then make this change lasting. Okay? So step one is the body. Our body demonstrates, okay? The survival mode and its effects on our body have been clearly demonstrated. So it is vital to perception rehabilitation to understand what the survival mode is doing to the body, because the body is the visible part of the self, all right? It is a powerful tool to guide in the rehabilitative process. The focus is on changing our dominant mode from survival to safety, which both have very clear physical responses, okay? The physical responses will be the guide for and the test to see what the transformation is that's going to be taking place. We'll get all of that out. This means that time will be spent in front of our mirrors, both literally and figuratively, okay, throughout the entire process. So the key is to become the key is to become an observer at this point, which is sufficient at this point in time. We'll jump into the other pieces of actually getting to work on ourselves at a later point in the model. But right now, just being an observer is how we're going to begin to be aware of ourselves. All right. So once awareness has taken place with the body, then we can be aware of the perceptions that guide the body to that observed mode. So that leads us to the mind, the perception of the mind. Okay. Just like the survival response in the body, perception takes place both internally and externally. So it's both from our internal experiences and processes as well as how we understand and experience the world around us. It's our environment. So for instance, the physical sight can determine what an object is, okay? But it can't determine what we think about the object, okay? So let's take a spider, for instance. The physical eye can determine its size, its color, its shape, but the perception of the mind determines whether or not it's gross or scary or fun or interesting or any of those things. So being aware of these perceptions and how they develop allows us to see how we can see the world, so that then we have a better understanding of why our body is responding the way that it's responding. All right. Our perceptions are the way that we translate everything in our environment. Every moment of every day, we perceive everything around us. The nature of this perception is generated from basic beliefs and our experiences. Call this the perception belief cycle. For instance, when your alarm goes off and it's time to go for a jog, we make a perception of both the alarm and the jogging. Most likely, both of them are perceived as negative and sends us into survival mode. People don't like to be forced to do something, even if it's ourselves that's doing the forcing. We don't like to even force ourselves to do stuff. Okay, so it triggers our survival response. The negative perception is then linked to the following action of hitting the snooze button or just turning it off completely, and that reinforces our perception for the next time. The next time our alarm goes off, we hate it even more and even more and even more. All right. So the goal is not to fight against ourselves, but is to find some way to be okay with the things that we want to do and make changes that are positive to us and begin to perceive things positively. Right. So if there's no way in the world that you're ever going to, be okay with this, what we're going to do then is change how we see this into a way that we would be okay with it. All right. Seems fairly simple. All right. So, again, so the physical eyes see, but how it sees is determined by what lenses, and that sight's being filtered through our beliefs. Okay, so the filtration process, it has two phases known as primary and secondary appraisals. That's more of a clinical term for those, and is discussed within the full foundations course. So it's also been determined this perception only takes place when attention is given to it. Okay, when we activate something, we're paying attention to it. So if attention's not given to the experience or the object, then it could pass by completely unnoticed, as if it didn't even exist at all. All right. So if there's a lion, if you don't see the lion, then you can't perceive the lion. Now that changes it a little bit in the fact that if we spend time thinking about a lion, we are then identifying our perception about it, and that can actually trigger a physical response as well. So our survival mode stimuli are not necessarily all things that we physically see with our body, with our physical eyeballs. All right. But some of them are, meaning that if we are scared of lions and there is one sitting over here in a box, but we don't know that it's over there, we're not responding to it. All right. Unless someone, of course, mentions it, and then, of course, we go crazy. But again, had nothing to do with whether or not we saw it. So it's kind of this double-bladed sword that really, really gets us to where we need to take the philosophy of perception rehabilitation, in that we look for the physical responses. Pay attention to the body and how it responds in survival mode or in safety mode, and that will tell you how you perceive and what you believe. All right. Which leads us to the belief of the spirit. So after the lenses of life start to reveal themselves, it will become pretty evident that they're rooted in something much deeper. And that deeper place is the beliefs. So as aforementioned, becoming aware of and changing our beliefs is a deeply spiritual process that should not be taken lightly. Okay? Absolutely should not be taken lightly. So perception rehabilitation separates our beliefs into either survival beliefs or safety beliefs. We try to keep things focused because the point is not to do all sorts of radical life changes and transformations, but the goal is we want to eliminate unwanted stress. And eliminating unwanted stress in our lives is going to lead us to a massive amount of positive health outcomes, right? So we're going to categorize everything about the self into either survival or safety. All right. So to help us to stay focused, we're looking more of the quality of the belief than the content of the belief. All right. So that's the work that we're intending to go into with this. So beliefs are more than intellectual understanding of something. A belief, by definition, is something that is held as truth to the individual. It's a foundational truth that generates the lenses through which we see the world. Beliefs are formed through both internal and external means, right? So internal formation. This comes from our experience and experimentation. These beliefs are generated by the world around us and how it's observed. Like, for instance, we put it to the test with the sunrise. All right. We see the sunrise every single morning, and we put it to the test by going out there and we see it every morning without fail. And so we begin to build these foundational beliefs. These are coming from childhood in our most formative first 7 years. And it generates a basic foundational truth that the sun rises every morning. And from now on, we don't need to see it rise. We just know it will be rising. And we believe that the sun rises every morning because we have experimented and proven, and we know that to be true. Okay? Becomes our foundational truth. It becomes what we have determined on our own to be true. So this is the type of belief that perception rehabilitation is looking to transform. These are our own internal, experimental, and experiential beliefs. But there are also external beliefs, and these are beliefs that we gain from basically subcontracting out the process of experience and experimentation, right? These are ones that we allow other people to gain some sort of authority in our lives, and we then just listen to their authority and we take it upon their authority as truth for us. All right, this is what takes place with the occurrences of the placebo effect and nocebo effect. If you've heard of those, we discussed them throughout the course. So this is what's taking place in all of these placebo type things. This is how we develop beliefs from our parents and from other authority figures as we grow up. We just basically take their word for it. Okay? But we'll find that those sometimes are a little bit dangerous as we get older. We realize that maybe that person or that thing didn't really actually know what they were talking about in the first place. And so we need to then go back and figure out, what do we believe about it? And then we begin to experiment and experience different things to then either solidify what they told us or to contradict what they told us and to establish our own beliefs. And that, again, that internal piece of belief transformation is what perception rehabilitation is all about. So the gradual transformation of beliefs is what we call a qualitative transformation or a qualitative formation of beliefs, and an instantaneous belief formation is what we call a qualitative. So qualitative things are things that are coming from trauma. They're instantaneous. They're coming from bliss, some sort of quality experience, large quality experience, whether positive or negative, that basically instantaneously establish beliefs. All right. This is very, very prevalent in traumatic experiences. Highly traumatic experiences go a long way to instantaneously set into ourselves that what we believe about something, and therefore then in order to trigger the survival response to help us through that the next time, or establish some blissful experience, some high level of good quality experience that again instantly ingrains into ourself that this is something that creates safety for us, and then we yearn to go towards that at any given chance, right? So that's quality and quantity of formation of our beliefs. It also works with our lenses, all right? And so it's basically the same thing that where we look at the old frog in the boiling water scenario. If you take a frog and you throw it in a pot of boiling water, it will jump right out. Okay. But if you put a frog in a pot of regular temperature water and you just slowly turn the heat up a little bit, the frog will never know, and it will boil itself to death, and it will just sit in that pot and chill all day long because it has no idea that these gradual transformations of the temperature have taken place. So we want to be aware of those things so that we can then begin to make the identifications of those triggers and those different stimuli, and then, of course, make the transformations on our own. So that is, in a nutshell, the awareness piece of perception rehabilitation. The primary focus of perception rehabilitation is understanding, growing, guiding, and transforming the internal quantitative beliefs that are identified within ourselves. Okay?